President Trump is continuing his crackdown on higher education, ordering the Education Department to start collecting data on the race, gender, test scores, and GPAs of college applicants. This comes amid his push to target race-based university admissions, which some conservatives view as illegal discrimination.
Now, as a reminder, the Supreme Court already ruled against the use of affirmative action in admissions in 2023, but the High Court says colleagues may still consider how a student's race shaped their lives if applicants share that information in their admissions essays. Still, Trump alleges that colleges may be skirting the ruling. Legal experts say the new order could have a chilling effect on universities, and experts say the order could wind up making wealth even more influential in admissions. Northeastern University history professor Simon Rabinovich writes, quote, "Say it over and over until people understand. Affirmative action for the rich is the central plank of elite college admissions."
Dartmouth economics professor Paul Novosad says college dishonesty about admissions practices is a central part of the public's loss of trust, since colleges don't seem capable of being honest about this stuff, so taking away the option of dishonesty seems good. All right, so this story broke yesterday. Daily Caller first to report.
Nice.
A little feather in our cap.
Okay, congrats.
Thank
there you go.
We love a good scoop. But yes, they are asking colleges to turn over admissions data because the concern is that they are using the essay carve-out as basically a way to do backdoor affirmative action. So the Supreme Court did have this exclusion where they said students can talk about race in their admissions essays, and colleges can use that to get a sort of holistic picture of the applicant and understand their life experience and things of that nature. But what they can't do is use those essays to determine that someone is a minority and maybe give them more points in the admissions process, so to speak, simply because they are of a minority race. And so the Trump administration wants this admissions data to basically make sure that that's not happening.
And I think saying it just as it is, standalone, is like, oh yeah, of course we need to be very transparent in our admissions and see all the stuff. And like, yeah, by itself, without the whole history of our country, that's a fine statement. But I think like it intimidates college and actually discourages diversity, which we know is a pillar of equality in our country, understanding why affirmative action was even created, right? Because there were a lack of opportunities for people of color to be in these spaces systemically. And I think when you think about historically black colleges and universities like Howard University up the block, these were created because black people were traditionally left out wholly of the college or university process and excluded widely in a large majority. And so even though we have elevated and extended past that, and our society is very proudly diverse and integrated, you know, factors to consider about wealth and how it's still unfair advantages for people are still like heavily weighted on the college process, which will lean it to be less diverse because of people and their access. So when you think about legacy admissions, that's an issue because your family or someone had you in the school, and so now you get in, which is a large majority of people that are not of color. So then your legacy will continue to be people not of color. Then you think about how this benefits families that significantly give financial donations to colleges. Like, do we want everybody in the school who's not qualified being somebody's son or daughter or niece or nephew that gave $1 million to the School of Journalism? No, we also want great writers to be in the School of Journalism from all backgrounds. Then you have early admissions programs. Research suggests that I was reading that applicants are actually 3 times more likely to be white in those early admissions programs. Then you have disproportionate access to resources. So when we talk about standardized testing, SAT prep courses, elite like services that allow you to write better essays, obviously people from a higher income have the luxury to consider things like that. And so when you're preparing for these tests and not taking into consideration what socioeconomic background somebody comes from, then you're not considering that perhaps they didn't get and I don't know how the SATs are graded now. When I was back, it was like 1,500 or whatever. Like maybe they didn't get the highest score because they didn't have the opportunity to prep, but they still are brilliant and could probably bring massive things to, let's say, Columbia or Harvard or Northwestern or any school. And then there's also a wealth gap, you know, in standardized testing. So, you know, there's a huge wealth gap between black and white families, and it impacts access to test prep courses like we were just talking about. So when you add all those things in and then consider why affirmative action or race is considered, it's because largely a lot of times people affected by all the things I just named are people of color, way more often than proportionately in this country. And so you still want to give people the same opportunity if they're smart, if they're promising, if they've sold you on their essay that they belong and are passionate about this school. You want to give them an opportunity to also achieve the American dream, understanding our country's history.
Yeah, I think you've hit on a really important point here, which is that I view a lot of the issues with lack of diversity of all kinds, not just racial kinds, in colleges to really be more about socioeconomic status. As someone who comes from a blue-collar background and was a first-generation college student, I was really grateful to benefit from programs at Georgetown that were catered towards making sure that we had the same opportunities once we got to school. And I think the really brilliant way to get around this issue and really not take race out of the equation, but make it more about giving people with less advantages early in life the opportunity to attend these really great colleges is by focusing on making sure that there's diversity in socioeconomic status, which would disproportionately benefit minority students because, as you mentioned, there is this wealth gap that exists. Coleman Hughes, who's a really prominent Black conservative commentator, talks about this issue a lot and how this could be a way to keep in line with the Civil Rights Act while also making sure that people from disadvantaged backgrounds still have opportunities. Because I think one of the dangers with affirmative action programs, and to be fair, the Supreme Court, when they first talked about affirmative action decades ago, acknowledged that there would come a time where they would probably have to reverse that decision because they had largely achieved their goals in giving minority students more advantages. But what we're looking at now is a situation where the color of the skin does not capture the totality of a person's background or experience. You could have wealthy offspring of African political leaders being weighted the same as someone from an inner city Chicago or New York neighborhood because they both are Black. And that's obviously not a fair situation. It actually crowds out exactly the kind of people who come from a lower socioeconomic status or a place with less opportunity because they are being marked at the same level as someone who does have advantages but happens to have the same skin color.
And I don't think it has to be an or thing. I think it should be and. So if we are going to say, fine, we got rid of affirmative action, we are also going to say we should get rid of anybody basically paying their way into colleges. Anybody who, these legacy programs that overwhelmingly affect only one group of people based on race because of who had access. So, because you can't or detangle the two things, right? Socioeconomic background, for the most part, disproportionately affects communities of color. They're in lower socioeconomic brackets based on the wealth gap. Like, this is just actual research. So even though, yes, there are anomalies and exceptions and there's Black excellence and people who are doing really well in the Black community, which I'm extremely proud and happy about, there's still overwhelmingly way too many, based on the proportion of people of color in this country, people that are underserved and don't have just simple access or visibility to opportunities that should be given the same access because they are equally as smart. They are equally as encouraged. They are equally as interested in being a part of a college community. And so I think that race is hard to detangle the two, especially if you don't specifically address that there is an issue there and just pretend like it's all about socioeconomics, because there still are opportunities given to, let's say you're a poor white person that has a rich uncle 3 uncles away. He still can call somebody and get you into Harvard.
Oh gosh, I wish I had had that.
But I mean, like, but people of color might not even have the person connected to the university at all with the legacy admission when you look at the numbers of people involved in certain colleges. So that's my biggest concern, is to make sure that we're just trying to level out the playing field and not only doing one thing. So what are we adding as well to make sure that it's not just colleges full of rich people's kids?
Yeah, and obviously the problem with legacy admissions is that colleges that are mostly privately funded, of course, want the alumni donations coming in. So that's a tricky issue. Of course, they're not going to handicap themselves in the process of doing this, and I'm amenable to that argument. But I hear what you're saying about making sure that people who come from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds get included as well. I consider myself part of that group, and I obviously benefited greatly from my college education. But I think the beauty, again, of focusing on that aspect of it is that it will capture the fact that Black people have a higher level of being in the lower socioeconomic groups. So you can do that without focusing solely on race. One of the other issues, I think, is that overall Americans feel that college should be a place for meritocracy. And so if you want to make sure that people have the access to study for the SATs or be in AP classes and do all of those things to get you to the point of going to a high-level college, then that's something that we have to start way earlier in life, right? That needs to be done in the K through 12 level to make sure that people are prepared for the college that they're going to, and we're not failing them if they get there and aren't ready for that situation and having lower graduation rates or lower GPAs. Like, let's set them up for success from the beginning.
Well, and and I know we could talk about this forever, but
Right.
like if you look at why communities are the way they are, like we just talked about redistricting, that would cut funding for certain neighborhoods or add funding to other neighborhoods. Some of those neighborhoods that are disproportionately affected are Black neighborhoods. So this is all things like we talk about local communities, we talk about overcrowding of schools. I went to college in Philadelphia. They had like 50 kids per class sometimes in the worst of times. I remember I had 20 kids maximum in my classes, so I was privileged in that way. Imagine one teacher trying to teach 50 kids. How can you then prepare them at a young age for academic excellence unless they just are naturally brilliant, which most of us are just naturally children, we learn. And so these are all things that are like affected. And then if your parents have the time to get you and resources to get you a tutor, that helps. If they don't and you're falling behind for natural reasons because you like to play too much in class, then you just fall behind, especially if your parents are working 2 jobs trying to make the American dream happen. There's so many, I think, instances that make this not a level playing field from the jump, that we would have to make sure that every single district and every single community is all having the same access to the proper teachers, resources, and funding in order for that to work, which would be sort of the society, or actually anti everything that's happening in society right now. We allow states to decide what they're doing, local communities to get voted in, and all these things to happen. And then naturally, somebody ends up suffering. Some communities are better based on who's wealthier to pay the better taxes and then get the roads paved so you can easily get to school without a flat tire, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like this endless, windy road of like, how do you get to the beginning level where all students have a proper education in this country to prepare for colleges?
There's a lot of factors. That's no joke there. All right, up next, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene has a warning for Fox News and is blasting Mark Levin. We'll be right back.